NASA just committed $20 billion to build a permanent base on the moon, and the single company positioned to profit from almost every layer of that plan belongs to one man. We've been told this is a story about science, about exploration, about America's return to the moon. But the actual contracts, the actual rockets, the actual AI systems running the base, they all point the same direction. And Wall Street noticed immediately. Tesla stock posted its best month since September 2024, the same week this announcement dropped.
His satellites shape wars. His tweets shape elections.
In the next 12 minutes, we're going to trace exactly how SpaceX, Tesla, and xAI are embedded inside NASA's $20 billion moon base plan contract by contract, layer by layer. NASA awarded nearly $1 billion in initial missions on May 26, 2026. And here's what almost nobody has talked about: the role artificial intelligence plays in making this base actually function. Because this is not just a construction story. It might be the first chapter of something far bigger than anyone in the room that day was willing to say out loud. The question nobody has answered until now is whether we're watching the birth of a public space program or the first quiet steps toward a private monopoly over the moon. That is what this video is about. Let's start with what NASA actually decided to do. For years, the plan was called the Lunar Gateway, a space station that would orbit the moon, acting as a waypoint for astronauts heading to the surface. It was expensive, it was complex, and in March 2026, Administrator Jared Isaacman stood up in front of Congress and said, "It's canceled. The $20 billion earmarked for the Gateway is now going directly into something more permanent. A surface base, infrastructure on the ground, the kind of facility that doesn't orbit and drift, it stays." NASA calls it the moon base, and the site is the lunar South Pole. Here's why that matters. The South Pole contains water ice. Permanently shadowed craters hold deposits that haven't seen sunlight in billions of years. Water means oxygen to breathe and hydrogen to burn, which means you can produce rocket fuel on the moon itself. That changes everything about the economics of deep space. The first $1 billion in contracts dropped on May 26, 2026. 4 companies won initial awards. 2 of them, Astrolab and Lunar Outpost, each received $220 million to develop the moon's first crewed rovers. Firefly Aerospace won a contract for rocket-powered hopping drones, and Blue Origin received a contract for its lunar lander. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket exploded during a hot fire test at Cape Canaveral just days after those contracts were announced. The explosion left Artemis experiments in limbo, rattled commercial space stocks, and created an immediate question about Blue Origin's ability to deliver. But Elon Musk's Starship kept flying, and that gap between the company that stumbled and the company that didn't is the core of everything that follows. And this is the part almost nobody has looked at closely. SpaceX holds something no other company on Earth currently has: a rocket capable of delivering the mass needed to actually build a moon base. Starship is, think of it like a container ship but vertical, the most powerful launch vehicle ever flown, capable of sending over 100 metric tons to low Earth orbit. For context, the International Space Station, the most expensive structure humans have ever built, weighs roughly 420 metric tons total, and it took 42 separate missions and 13 years to assemble it, piece by piece, in orbit. Starship changes that math completely. The Lunar Gateway, the architecture NASA just abandoned, required multiple launches, orbital refueling, and a rendezvous at the moon. The new surface-based architecture is designed around landing large payloads directly on the lunar surface. And right now, the only vehicle with that profile is SpaceX's. That's not an opinion. It's the reason NASA's Human Landing System contract, the official ride for American astronauts, went to SpaceX back in 2021. The transportation backbone was already locked in before a single moon-based contract was signed. But here's where the Tesla piece enters, and this is the connection that Wall Street spotted before most space journalists did. In 2025, Tesla launched its most advanced autonomous driving system, yet full self-driving, running on neural networks trained by the Dojo supercomputer. What Dojo does is train AI systems using video streams from millions of cars simultaneously, learning to navigate complex environments without direct human instruction. That is exactly the architecture you need on the moon. Here's why. On the lunar surface, you cannot drive a rover remotely in real time. The physics won't allow it. The moon is 384,000 kilometers away. By the time your command travels that distance and the response comes back, you've got a 1.3-second round-trip delay. In a rover navigating crater fields and loose regolith, 1.3 seconds is enough to crash. Everything on the moon has to be semi-autonomous, or fully autonomous. The crewed rovers that Astrolab and Lunar Outpost just won $220 million each to develop need AI that can handle terrain without waiting for a human to approve each decision. Tesla has spent a decade building exactly that, not for the moon, but for Earth's roads. The underlying capability is the same. Here's the number that anchors what Wall Street was actually pricing in. When the moon base announcement dropped, Tesla didn't just gain. It surged to its best monthly performance since September 2024. Analysts started using a phrase, the Musk infrastructure premium. The thesis that SpaceX's growing role in lunar infrastructure would eventually create some kind of financial bridge between Musk's companies. Speculation about a partial SpaceX IPO or a Tesla-SpaceX merger started circulating in the financial press. Musk hasn't denied it with any particular force. SpaceX is currently valued at roughly $350 billion privately. Tesla's market cap sits around $800 billion, if even a fraction of SpaceX's moon-based business were folded into a publicly traded vehicle. You're talking about a capital event that would reshape the composition of the S&P 500. This is not just a space story, this is a financial architecture story. But zoom out one more level and the stakes double. Because the United States is not the only country building toward the moon's south pole. China's lunar program, the Chang'e series, has been executing with almost flawless precision. Chang'e 6 returned the first ever samples from the moon's far side in 2024. China has publicly committed to landing taikonauts on the moon by 2030. Their target, the same south pole, the same water ice, the same rocket fuel deposits. For the first time since the 1960s, two superpowers are racing toward identical real estate. Except this time, the real estate is valuable, not symbolically economically. Whoever controls the South Pole water ice controls the fuel economy of the entire Cislunar region. There's a phrase that keeps surfacing in NASA documents and congressional hearings, Cislunar dominance, the ability to operate freely in the space between Earth and the moon and to deny that freedom to adversaries. That is not the language of exploration. That is the language of strategic infrastructure control. And the company best positioned to provide that capability, the transportation, the AI autonomy, the communications is private. It is not a nation. It is not a treaty. It belongs to one man. When exactly did NASA become the customer? Because that's the structural shift most people have missed. The old NASA model, government designs the rocket, government owns the hardware, government controls the mission. The new model, NASA writes the requirements. Private companies build the systems, and NASA pays for access. That model is working brilliantly for cost efficiency. Starship is cheaper per kilogram to orbit than anything NASA ever designed internally. Commercial space has driven launch costs down by a factor of roughly 10 over 15 years. That is genuinely extraordinary. But it also means the moon-based infrastructure will be owned and operated by private entities. The South Pole site will be serviced by SpaceX rockets. The AI systems managing autonomous surface operations may run on architectures descended from Tesla's FSD platform. And xAI's Grok is already being integrated into Starlink satellite operations, the communication backbone that any moon base would depend on. SpaceX, Tesla, xAI. These are not three separate companies. They are three interlocking layers of a single vertical stack. Transportation, autonomy, intelligence, each one feeds the others, and the stack now has a moon-sized contract attached to it. So let's answer the question we've been carrying since the beginning. Is this a public space program or the first step toward a private lunar monopoly? The honest answer is it's both at once, and the distinction matters less than it used to. The moon base is publicly funded. Congress appropriated the money. NASA is the contracting authority. The science will be open. The mission is national. The crew will carry American and partner nation flags. Italy signed a formal cooperation agreement with NASA in April 2026. More countries are expected to follow under the Artemis Accords framework. But the infrastructure, the rockets that reach the moon, the AI that runs the rovers, the communications that keep the base connected, the energy systems, the fuel depots, that infrastructure will be built and operated by private companies. And across nearly every dimension of the moon base architecture, SpaceX currently has no peer competitor. Here's what's actually unprecedented about this. Every previous mega infrastructure build-out in American history, the Transcontinental Railroad, the telegraph network, the interstate highway system, the internet backbone eventually got regulated nationalized or opened to competition. The economics forced it. Monopoly control of critical infrastructure becomes politically untenable once people depend on it. Space is different. The barrier to entry is not regulatory, it's physical. Building a Starship-class rocket requires 10 to 15 years and more than $10 billion in sustained investment. No startup is doing that. No government outside of China is currently constructing a competing architecture. The competition will fix-it mechanism that corrected every previous infrastructure monopoly might not apply in the same time frame here. Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator who canceled Lunar Gateway and committed to the surface base, made his fortune as CEO of Shift4 Payments. He was also mission commander of SpaceX's Polaris Dawn mission in 2024, the first private spacewalk in history. He arrived at NASA aligned with the commercial model, and his first major decision deepened that alignment. None of this makes the moon base a bad idea. The scientific case for a permanent lunar presence is overwhelming access to water ice, helium-3, mineral resources, and a staging point for eventual Mars missions. On pure scientific merit, $20 billion is arguably underpriced. But we are in genuinely new territory. We have never built permanent off-Earth infrastructure in an era when private companies can construct it faster and cheaper than governments can. And the legal framework for what happens next is still being written. The Artemis Accords, the international agreement governing lunar activity, state clearly that no nation can claim sovereignty over the moon. But they say nothing about who owns infrastructure once it's built on the surface. A company that constructs and operates the only fuel depot at the South Pole can charge whatever the market will bear for access. There is no regulatory body with jurisdiction on the moon. No FTC, no antitrust division, no Public Utilities Commission. The rules that govern terrestrial infrastructure were written after the infrastructure existed, when its importance was undeniable and its capture by private interests was already complete. The moon is moving faster. We might want to think about the rules now while the base is still on blueprints. Here's the reframe to take with you. Every great infrastructure story in history looks at the moment it's happening like a story about technology, the railroad, the telegraph, the internet. It's only in retrospect that we understand it was always a story about who owns the network. The moon base is the first node of a network that doesn't exist yet but will. And right now, the man who controls the rockets, the AI, and the financial incentives is positioned to own more of that network than any single entity in human history has owned off-Earth infrastructure. That might be fine, it might not. But it's a question worth asking before the network is built, not after. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one.